Hello, in this video I'm going to be demonstrating the installation of Ricochet UHMW skid plates on a 2020 Polaris General 2-seater. This video is going to suffice for both the UHMW and our aluminum sets. They both install in pretty much the same way. There's a few hardware differences, but not really anything that would be worth making a separate video for. So the information in this video will work for both sets. The first thing you need to do to begin your installation is to remove all the factory skid plates from the machine. That's already been done on this, so we're just going to jump right into the installation. For the UHMW, it's best to start from the rear and work your way forward. For the aluminum, you can kind of go either way, but I would probably go from the rear working your way forward. That seems to be the easiest way to do it. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to hang your clamps around the frame. You can do this before you get the skid plate on. It's a little bit easier to get them in there. And with all the bolts that we're providing that's going to go into any of our hardware, the clamps, the nut plates, things like that, we're going to put some anti-seize on those. Our clamps and nut plates have an all-metal locking nut on them, and it makes it much easier to get things to sit down snug, get the bolt all the way tightened with some anti-seize. It's just going to help lubricate it a little bit to get through that all-metal locking feature. Also, it's going to help prevent rust and corrosion issues, so if you ever need to remove your skid plates for whatever reason, all your hardware just isn't going to be seized into place. Anywhere where we're picking up the factory mounts, we're going to put Loctite on those. Do not put Loctite on the bolts going into our clamps. Loctite is not required there. The all-metal locking nut will suffice there. Anything else where it's just going to be a nut and a bolt, we're supplying a nylock nut, so you don't need to put Loctite on that either. You could, but again, I would probably just use Loctite just where it's picking up the factory mounting locations, and that should be good for you. So you'll just refer to your hardware guide as to what size of clamps and everything goes where. All the bags should be marked with the corresponding plate number. So don't just open up your hardware and spread it out all over. It's going to be kind of a chore to figure out what goes where. It's already kind of pre-sorted for you. So we'll get the plate up into position. And then we've got access holes here next to these clamps, so you can run your finger through the access hole to get the clamp lined up with the mounting slot in the skid plate. Okay, so you got those two clamps started. Now the plate can just hang. The two rear bolts, on the aluminum plate there's some spacers welded to it, and it's just going to be a nut and a bolt. For the UHMW, you've got a floating spacer since we can't weld the plastic. Those two mounts need to be drilled out. I would actually hold off and I would do those last. Get all the plates into position, all the plates on into position, get everything all adjusted, tighten everything down, and then go back and drill those last two holes. Because as it is right now, if you drill it out and then you have to adjust it, the hole that you drill might not line up. So I would do that last. So we're just going to set those to the side for now. Another thing you can do, see this plate's kind of hanging down. You can just grab one of the bolts for your next plate up without the cup washer, and just get the plate aligned and just put the bolt in without the cup washer. And that's going to kind of help hold that plate into position. Now when you bring the next plate over, it's got the larger hole for the cup washer. It can just go right over that. You'll be able to pull that bolt out and then reinstall it with the cup washer. So that's probably the easiest way to do that. So that plate is loosely hung. Now we're going to move on to the next plate. And for this plate, there's three clamps that it's probably going to be much easier to hang them first before you get the skid plate into position. That's on this bar over here on the passenger side. There's a heat shield back here that prevents you getting back to the back clamp on. On the driver's side, it's wide open. On this, they got a heat shield because the fuel tank's there, so it's probably easier to hang that clamp before you get the plate into position. The other two spots are going to be on the side here, and it's going to be located right in the middle of this engine mount weldment on the side, and there's a little slot that gives the clearance for the clamp to go around the bowl, or the tube. And like I said, there's a little slot where that's welded on. So we're just going to get that into position, and again we have the access hole so you can be able to line it up later. But on these three spots, it's probably easiest just to get the clamp on first. And if you kind of tilt it up, it should stay in its relative position for the most part. The last two clamps are going to go on this bar here, and that's wide open. We can put those on with a skid plate. So. We've got our 3 cup washers and bolts here. They're going to pick up the factory mount, and we're going to put some Loctite on those. So now we can take the plate and go ahead and get it up into position. And again, we're going to kind of do that same trick with this front mount here. We're just going to grab one of the bolts without the cup washer for the front plate. And this will also kind of help hold into the position, as you have to kind of slide it underneath these channels here. So you grab the plate, you're going to slide it underneath that plastic, get the clearance, and then slide it back over on the other side. As you can see, that'll pretty much hold it. Then we'll bring it up, get into the position. And again, I'm going to just start this one mount there with just the bolt. And now we can come back in and do the 3 common mounts on the rear of the plate here. And we're leaving all of these bolts loose for now. And that's just if we need to adjust anything. Everything will move around for us. We'll be able to get everything dialed in for the best fit. And now you can see I can just pull this bolt straight out now because it's got the larger hole for the cup washer. And then we'll start the bolt again with the cup washer. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now we can come in and start our clamps. Just line that up with a skid plate. The mounting slot. Start that bolt. Alright, all those are started. Now we just have the other 2 off to the other side. And again, we're going to put anti-seize on all of these bolts. And these, they can just come up from behind. You can just set it around the frame tube, nice and easy. Okay, so that takes care of those. And now we can go ahead and get the front plate into position. This front plate is going to be the same thing. You got to slide it in underneath this plastic, kind of one at a time. Some Loctite. We're going to start this center one. That's just going to help hold it. There we go. Okay, and then we got the same deal with column mounts in these 3 spots. So we're going to pull this bolt out that was just kind of holding the previous plate on. Pull it through the cup washer hole. Slide it through the cup washer. Put some Loctite on it and reinstall it. Okay, so that takes care of those. Then on the side here, we've got the cup washer with the nut and a bolt. And that's just to tie these 2 plates together. There's not a common mount there. These plates just kind of floated without it. So just gonna take your bolt, put it through your cup washer. You're gonna slide it through. You take the nut, slide it over the bolt through the access hole. Make sure it seats down all the way. And then we're going to take the nut. And this takes a little dexterity. I usually kind of grab the nut with 2 fingers like that. I'll get it in there, find the bolt, and be able to kind of pull the other finger out while getting on top of the bolt, and then just thread it to catch the thread. It's a little tricky, but it can be done. And there's no need for, I mean, you could put anti-seize on it. It would keep it from rusted, but it's an eye-lock nut, so no need for any Loctite. Like I say, you could put some anti-seize on there. That might not be a bad idea. Okay, then that just leaves us with our 4 clamps up front. Come to the mounting hole, the access hole on the outside to get to the mount. For the inboard one, you can just come through the top side. And then just come through the top side again. Okay, so that's all of the mounting hardware started. Now before we tighten anything down, you just want to make sure that your cup washers are going to sit down flush. It's kind of the main thing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to tighten the cup washers first. If you get your cup washers where they all sit down flush, that should get all your skid plates in pretty good alignment with each other. Make sure they're sitting in the counterboard, they're not hanging up on the edge or anything. And with these factory mounts, it's just a little 6mm, there's not much thread there. You really don't want to over tighten them. You can have the potential to strip out the thread. So a little bit of caution there. Okay, now we have that plate into position. Yep, I jumped ahead of myself a little bit here. Loosen these up a hair. This next plate forward needs to slide up a little as well. Okay, so those are all seated down. They're fairly snug. As you can see, we can still adjust this rear plate here. Okay. Okay, now before we tighten anything else, this is where you're probably going to want to go ahead and drill the two rear mounts out for that plate. It's already been drilled on this machine, but let me show you what you're kind of looking for. Okay, here you can see the holes that we've drilled. They're, if I can hold a flashlight and point to it at the same time. They are right there. Now you want to be careful. You don't have a ton of room to you know, get that hole. You get it too far forward, you're going to run into this wall here, and then you're not going to be able to, you know, put your bolt or anything on. So basically, is what you're looking to do is just, you're going to line up. If you have the UHMW, you're going to want to put the steel sleeve that goes in between that slot, that stop for the bolt. You're going to kind of want to use that to locate where you're going to have to drill, and then you're going to mark it and transfer punch it from the bottom side and go ahead and drill. Like I say, this one's kind of right on the edge. You wouldn't want it any further up than that, or else you're not going to be able to get the nut on it. This one's okay where it's at, but just for reference, you probably want to have it come back a little bit. And you're going to do it on both sides. You can see the hole drilled on that side there. So like I say, you're going to get the plate lined up and make sure that you are, where you're marking it, that you're going to be able to have it far enough back from that wall there so you can go ahead and get a nut on it. You don't want to get it too far forward where you're not going to be able to get a nut on because of that wall. So like I say, line the skid plate up for the best fit. I would mark it towards the rear of the hole. That's going to make sure that, you know, you get it back far enough that you're going to be able to get a nut on. Make sure you're centered. If, you know, left and right, if you're not centered, you might end up being too far in and you're going to run in this way. So like I say, centered left to right, then make sure it's back far enough that you're going to be able to get that nut on it. So once you have those drilled, if you're doing our UHMW, it's going to be a longer bolt, and it's going to be that sleeve that goes over all the bolts. That's just a stop. This UHMW, without that stop, you could actually just keep tightening, and you could actually just pull the bolt straight through the material. So that's, as a stop, it's going to butt up against the clamp, and that way you can't go any further. So if you have the UHMW, it's going to be the heavy duty washer, the stop. You're going to run that through the skid plate. Then this spacer is going to go between the skid plate and the frame. If you have the aluminum set, this spacer is welded to the skid plate. Like I say, we just can't weld to plastic, so it's a floating spacer. So you'll just run it through, get the spacer on, and then run it through the hole that you've drilled. And like I say, really pay attention to that hole where you're drilling it, because if you get it too far forward, it's not going to work. You won't be able to get the nut on it. If you get it too far forward, you won't be able to get the bolt through it. You'll run into that wall. Then it'll be the washer and then the nut after that. Okay, so that's all the hardware for the rear plate. We'll go ahead and tighten these cup washers down. You know, just line up this plate so mainly so the middle slot fits the best there. And again, you don't want to over tighten these 6mm mounts going into the frame. There's not a whole lot of thread in that frame, and it's really easy to strip those out. If you do strip one out, the easiest way to fix it is going to be get a 1/4-20 self-tapping bolt. A 1/4-20 is slightly larger than a 6mm, and it should be able to bite and give you a good thread. And then once you get all the cup washers started, all the 6mm cup washers started, I guess I should say, now we can go through and we can start tightening all the clamp hardware. And as you're tightening these, kind of feel to make sure that the clamp stays seated around the tube. Sometimes when it's still a little loose, that clamp can actually rotate off the tube. you should be able to feel if it does. So go nice and slow at first, and then once you start to get it tighter, it'll start to pull the clamp down, and then the clamp won't rotate. It's just when you initially start the tightening process. And these bolts you should feel snug up against that stop. Okay, so that takes care of all of our clamps. Now we have the 2 cup washers with the nuts here. If you have a 13mm wrench that has a little bit of a bend to it, that's going to make it a little easier to grab that nut. But okay, that takes care of those. Oh, looks like I missed a cup washer. And then we can come back and tighten up the very rear mounts. Okay, so that takes care of the belly skid installation. Okay, to install the floorboard skids, the factory plastic has 2 holes underneath it, and we're going to slide, we're calling this an extruded U-nut, over the plastic so it lines up with that hole. That hole is a little bit tight though, and it's hard to get the bolt to run through it. So we'd like to open that hole up just a little bit. Take an 11/32 drill, roughly 0.344, and we're just going to open up this plastic. And it's not much. It's just enough to let the bolt pass through. Like I said, it's kind of tight otherwise. The bolt doesn't really want to, kind of tries to thread through the plastic, and this makes it kind of a pain in the butt. So like I say, just take a drill and open up that hole just a little bit. Then you're going to take this clip. You're going to have to, kind of hold the plastic out a little bit by hand. Take the clip. It just slides over the factory plastic, and then just line it up with the hole. You might have to take a screwdriver or something and kind of work it. And then you're going to want to take a bolt and just make sure it can pass through and catch the thread, which right there we're good. So that's catching the thread, so that's ready to go. Okay, so once you have that done in those 2 locations, you can actually take the floorboard skid. You'll take your bolt with these cup washers. First, you also have to pull these factory bolts out. We're going to pick those up on the side here. So yeah, remove these 2 factory bolts first, then open up the holes, the existing holes that are in the plastic there, with roughly an 11/32 drill. You can go a little bit bigger if you want. I probably wouldn't go more than 3/8 max. Put that extruded U-nut, that body clip, whatever we're calling it, over the hole, line it up, make sure you can run the bolt through and catch the thread. And then we're just going to set the skid into position. And we're going to just start these bolts. Leave those loose for now. And then we're going to come in on the side ones, and again, probably not a bad idea to put some Loctite on these. And again, these threads in this frame are extremely thin, so you do not want to tighten those, especially on these side ones. They seem thinner than the others, and they are very easily stripped out. So, like I say, be real careful when snugging those down. And the Loctite will help too. You won't have to get it as tight for it to stay. And we're just going to start both of those by hand. Now we're going to kind of just make sure the plate's all the way back. And we are just going to, like I say, just snug those down. Do not over tighten these side holes. There's hardly any thread depth at all, and they are very easily stripped out. Basically, we're just waiting to make sure we pinch the washer down, and that's really about all we're shooting for. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we can actually come through and tighten the bottom bolts, the cup washers. You can get these good and tight. Okay. Now in the rear, we're going to have you match drill this hole. You know, once your plate's on where it's going to be, you can just take that same 11/32 drill bit, line it up with the hole in the aluminum, and just run it straight through the plastic. Then you're going to take your bolt, put your washer over the bolt, and then finish it up with the nut. And come through and tighten that down. And that takes care of the floorboard installation. Okay, now that we've got our floorboard skids installed, and it's the same procedure for left and right, so I'm just going to demonstrate it the one time in the video. We're ready to install the front plate up here. Now the front plate is always going to be aluminum, regardless of which kit you buy. It's just it's too hard to form a piece like with these intricate bends that's going to fit tight and nice with the UHMW. So we opt to do that one plate in aluminum. Same with our A-arm skids and our floorboard skids. They're all those will always be in aluminum. We just do not offer a UHMW option for those. So with the front plate here, there's two holes that are here from the factory, and they're dimpled, but they're not threaded. So we're supplying self-tapping bolts. It's probably easiest to actually take your self-tapping bolt and cut the thread before you get in the plate into position. That's already been done on this machine, but yeah, just take the bolt in your socket and just slowly, get it in there until it starts to bite. And then, once you feel it start to free up, you've gotten all the way through, you've got a good thread, back it out, and then we can go ahead and install the plate. So to install this plate, it's going to be this bar clamp, this nut plate that's going to go in the back, and then the self-tapping bolts in the front. And it's a little tight to get in here, but you're just gonna reach in from the side. There we go. And you're gonna set this bar clamp into position, and it's gonna line up with roughly with these two holes right there. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's got room to float. As long as we can catch the threads, we'll be okay there. You're gonna take your bolts. You're gonna wanna run anti-seize on these bolts. We're gonna go ahead and set the plate into position and start the bolts. And if you buy the UHMW version of our set, this front plate will always be black anodized just to match the rest of your set, so everything looks good. Now we're going to come in and just start the front self-tappers. And again, you don't want to tighten these down too hard. There isn't a whole lot of thread there. And then we can come through and we can tighten the rear bolts up here. And there we have it. So that takes care of the installation. I'm not going to demonstrate the A-arms. We actually have a separate video that shows how to install all of our A-arms. It's pretty much the same procedure for all of them, regardless of the machine. It's just hung by clamps. You want to have the wheels off the ground, you know, check for clearance. But like I say, we have a separate video that shows just the A-arm installation process. And like I say, it's pretty much the same process for any machine out there, whether it's a side-by-side, whether it's a four-wheeler. All the A-arms are pretty much installed in the same way. So just for the length of the video, I'm not going to demonstrate that, but that's Ricochet's full UHMW set. We got front to back coverage. We got the floorboards, A-arms front and rear, so that's good protection for your machine and for your passengers. You're not going to have any sticks or anything, you know, get up through the floor, penetrate through the footwell or anything like that. So it should keep you and your passengers safe and protect your machine for years to come. Thanks for watching.